What is up, my cutouts? Cardboard Ninja here, coming at you with another video. This time we're going to talk about two things at once. That's right. If you've looked at the splash art or read the title of this video, you know this is going to be about two things and two things only. One, penetration. Oh yeah, cue the Pornhub music. And the other thing, the opposite of penetration, resistance. So I've covered damage resistance in another video and all that good stuff like that, but there's something interesting that I found out in the patch notes. Most people ignored it, but what you guys may or may not know is there are in-game guides, and the in-game guides explain game mechanics of crossout to you. Anyone who's seen JB Ryder's video and he's like, oh, this is, if you've wondered where the pictures of where the frames came from, all he did was come to the in-game guide, click here, and it shows it, and you know, all this stuff like that. And now what you're thinking, Cardboard Ninja, are you about to just do the same thing? You know it, you know I am. You know I'm gonna do that. Just kidding. One of the things I'm going to first point out is penetration. Penetration is actually pretty important to go over because of the fact that many people don't understand it, and even though it does have it explained here, sometimes people don't get it. So, penetration at 100%, 100% of your damage is going to be accounted for effectively. Penetration at 80%, it means that if you deal up to 80% of your damage, the projectile disappears. 136, but the actual damage is 160. Pretty straightforward, and you can come here and you can actually read all that good stuff. So, why am I going over penetration? Well, penetration and damage resistance and protection tie together. Unfortunately, what they didn't do is create a nice sexy video explaining the difference between damage resistance and damage protection. So, for those of us who recall, I actually did a video on damage resistance and damage protection and explained why one is better than the other and why you want to set things up a certain way. Go ahead and find that video, click it, and that'll explain a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the things that I did not know was actually explained in this guide. And it is actually so important that it warrants reading. So, the difference between damage resistance, and I'm just going to read this to you. It's a characteristic of a part, like mass and durability. It reduces the current damage of a projectile that hits it, and applies to a specific damage type. The loss in total projectile damage due to resistance does not depend on the durability of a part with resistance. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to go to our storage and we're going to go to parts, and I'm going to point this out to you. We're going to look at anything from the engineer faction, and we're going to look at the Torino bonnet, and as you can see, it's got 10% bullet and 10% blast damage resistance. What that thing is saying is if you shoot that part, that Torino bonnet, for 1 million points of damage, it will reduce the damage, bullet damage, by 100,000. Even though it has a durability of 119, it doesn't matter. That's because it reduces damage that comes in on contact by 10% of that appropriate type. That's what they're saying. And if we go back to the guide, it indicates that damage protection, and for those of us who are unfamiliar, damage protection is the other form of damage resistance in the game, is an acquired property of a part, meaning that you get it from an upgrade, a co-driver, or unique features, etc. And one part can have several resistance values from different sources, which all stack up together. Damage protection reduces the damage a part receives, regardless of its type, and actually means how many more hits the part can withstand. The loss in total projectile damage due to the protection depends on the durability of the part with protection. This is important. What this means is if someone fires a 1 million damage bullet at something with damage protection, it will prevent only up to however many hit points that part has in durability. So, as it says here, therefore, damage protection primarily serves to improve the survivability of a part with this parameter, while the part with damage resistance can better protect the parts located behind it. What does that mean? Well, we're going to go right here and we're going to take a look at this. This is a left heat sink. It is a Mars rover part from the Dawn's Children. The Dawn's Children have no bullet protection at all. So, that means if I fire a bullet at it, standard hit damage, 100% of the damage is going to go through. And this is going to be compared, and it also has 38 hit points, and this is going to be compared directly against the left pauldron. Left pauldron is a cast part from the Hyperborea faction, and features 15% damage resistance to bullet. So, if you fire at this with, let's just go to the exhibition, grab ourselves something fun like the median. Bang. The median's base damage, as we saw, was like 160. You'll see that, actually I don't even need to say it out loud, I can just show you by shooting. You'll find the resulting damage in a moment. So, we know the base damage is 160. If we fire through the Dawn's Children's part, which is attached to an averter, giving it averted hit points, 110 gold damage, 38 white damage. 110 made through, meaning that part had effective durability of about 50. The actual number is 49.4 durability. If we take the median, which does 160 damage, and fire it clean through that tiny little part right there, the pauldron, 128 damage goes through, but only 8 damage was, the part only had 8 damage to stop. This is the equivalent of 32 hit points of part damage in the way. So even though the pauldron only has a paltry 8 hit points, because the median hit so hard, it actually blocked 38 hit points of damage, whereas the Dawn's Children part blocks a total of 50 damage, even though its base durability is 38. Here's the thing, though. No matter what, under any and all circumstances, this part has the equivalent of 50 hit points when attached to an averter. It will never increase. It doesn't matter how hard the hit is. So if we go to the exhibition and grab ourselves a spike, the spike's damage is 198, I think. I'll fire it at the damage ball in one moment just to figure it out. 194, I think. So we'll fire this at the damage ball real fast. 194. So what we'll see is the gold damage is going to be reduced by 50, which will be 144. Yep. However, the cast part with 15% durability is going to receive significantly less damage than normal. 156. 156 damage means that that part now blocked the equivalent of 36 damage. So the harder you hit, the more damage, the percentage damage reduction obviously kicks in. And finally, we'll go to the Astraeus. The Astraeus does a base of 304 damage when fully charged. And we, of course, will test that. Whoops, that's exactly what I wanted to do. There's your 304. When firing through the part that we all know, the Dawn's Children part is only going to do, well, it's going to reduce that by 50. So we're going to do 254 gold. Yep, 254 gold. But when we fire through the cast part, what happens? 250. That's right. The cast part with 8 hit points now blocks the equivalent of 54 damage. And for those of us wondering if the Scorpion's any better or worse, let's take a look. Believe it or not, based on Scorpion mechanics, the damage it deals, how much damage it loses when it passes through, it's a crapshoot. You have no idea what it is. But now you're going to find out, because I'm going to fire this right on through with y'all watching. It did 224 gold. How much do you think it'll do when firing through that cast part? That tiny little part. 225. So, there you have it. So, now you might be wondering, okay, so if this is a damage and penetration guide, what's up? So now we know the following. The damage resistance of parts, and this is also one of the reasons why, and I mentioned this in my previous video, having to deal with the ratings of the factions. Someone said, how can the Hyperborea rate so high? The reason why Hyperborea, whatever you want to pronounce it, rates so high is because the cast parts all have 15% bullet damage resistance. Every one of them, which means that they reduce the damage by an incredible amount. And in fact, when people are guarding their builds, what you should do is put your highest bullet damage on the exterior. That will prevent cannons, Astraeus, Scorpions, you name it, will prevent those things from doing as much damage to the parts behind it. And this also means, and this also explains, why tracks, such as the armored track with its 25% bullet resistance, and the tank track with its 25% bullet resistance, in fact, all tracks with their 25% bullet resistance, are so resistant to Scorpion damage penetrating through and hitting crap on the other side. So 25% bullet resistance happens first, reducing the damage before the Scorpion dumps its load into the track itself, and then it barely penetrates anything beyond that. So that's the reason why tracks are so unbelievably good right now at stopping damage from getting through. Because, put simply, they're reducing the damage by so much that Scorpions barely scratch what's on the other side. All right, so that's your damage. But let's go to penetration. Someone made a video out there, and they made the claim that certain cannons can just ignore pass-through parts. That isn't exactly the case. What they did was they had gun mounts like this, and they threw down some gun mounts, and I think they threw down some buggy floors like this, and then they threw down, like, I don't know, some elbows. Why not? Just grab a couple elbows and throw them up in here. Bang, bang. And we'll just go bang. And this, actually, the next one can just be attached directly to this, right? Whatever, doesn't matter. And then they grabbed an avalanche and fired it through. Here's the interesting thing about the avalanche. The avalanche it's not unique. It follows the same rules as everything else, but it does 500 bullet damage, right? That's a lot of bullet damage to do. 500 bullet damage and 200 blast damage. So with 40% penetration, that means that 200 damage, if you deal 200 damage with this, it will detonate. Basically due to penetration mechanics, right? But for some reason, it'll blast right through every single pass-through part in the game, even though each pass-through part itself supposedly reduces your damage by, or, you know, takes 90% less damage. I'm sorry, yeah, each part takes 90% less damage. Well, there's an interesting reason for this passing right on through this, ignoring that crap. And the reason why is because the bullet damage on the avalanche is 500. It has a 200 damage consumption before detonation, but the bullet damage on it is still 500. So when it passes through the first part, and in this instance, it's going to pass through this left elbow. When it passes through the first part, you're like, oh, well, 90% goes through, right? Wrong. It actually does two calculations. One, it's only going to take 10% damage. But it's taking 10% of 500. 10% of 500 is enough to destroy it. Let's just say it's 50, right? The durability of this part is 29. So the 500 bullet damage is going to instantly clear this. And you only subtract 29 durability because it only has 29 durability to lose. And then you just, as you pass through, it's only losing such a meager amount from that 500 damage, right? You're losing 29, 29, 29, 29. So you've lost a total of what? 120 by there, I think? Because that's 3, 6, 9, 12. And then these each only have 16. And then the gun mounts actually do have 38 hit points each. And if I recall correctly on that last shot, the last gun mount did manage to stop it, but that requires like every pass-through part in the game in order to actually stop the avalanche. So that would mean that the avalanche can basically pass through just about anything on your build, especially seeing as it's dealing 500 damage to the part. And if 200 of that gets consumed, then it will explode. So what can stop the avalanche, you might wonder? You're like, well, then I guess that just means the avalanche is unstoppable. It's going to plow right through your build unless it hits something like, I don't even know. I don't think there's anything that exists that can stop it. I mean, even the small plow the snow plow will be destroyed. Anything shy of the freight train plow is erased immediately, and that's just the way it is, right? Right? Wrong. See, here's the deal. Do you remember what I said earlier about penetration? Penetration is a hell of a drug. So what happens if you take Hyperborea parts, like these tiny little pauldrons, and put them right here? What happens? What do we think happens? Well, you're going to see what happens, because we're going to shoot it. I love my job. All right. Stopped it. That literally stopped it. Why? That's because percentage damage reduction is real. Each pass-through part, each Hyperborea pass-through part reduces the bullet damage by 15%. After passing through that many, just tiny little parts, it will set off the explosion because it will have used up its 40%. In fact, 3 parts is enough. I didn't need all 4. So if I move this forward, like to here, it doesn't really matter. Invert this just so I have a flat plane. Place it 1, 2, 3. Get rid of this, get rid of this. And sorry for the delay, we're just going to drive on over here and give that the bibbity boop so you all can see just what I'm talking about. 3 of these should reduce the damage of the avalanche by 45%. The single has 40% bullet penetration, penetration. So this should stop. And it didn't. I aimed too low. I missed. I'm pretty sure I missed. Let's find out. Like, I'm pretty sure I missed, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm wrong. There we go. I missed. So there you go. 3 pieces of Hyperborea, which amounted to 8, 16, 24 hit points, just stopped what amounts to 500 bullet damage. And that's because of the way that damage resistance works in this game. And so, there you have it. There's your quick view of what you should probably be doing with your builds. So one of the things that you'll note, let's just go on the exhibition and actually just look for cars. We're going to look for scorpions. We're going to look for trending. We're going to look for your standard hyper metas. These are your inverted scorp builds. These are your standard brick builds that are out there now, because everyone's like, oh, I need to shove bumpers on my car. Look at this. It's just, I need bumpers. And this is, people have resorted to bumpers out of fear. They're like, well, bumpers have a lot of durability. Scorpions can be removed with a... In reality, if you want to protect your scorpions, like, here's a prime example. This is the new ultra meta. They're like, well, look, if you hit me in the center, you're going to hit this, and then the scorpion damage won't go through. Scorpion damage won't go through because the durability of the bumpers is so great, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Hold on a second. If you wanted to actually defend yourself better than this, you'd actually be interweaving Hyperborea parts. Yeah, I'm not even joking. Hyperborean parts, with their 15% damage reduction, will actually keep you alive better against scorpions than some of these setups that presently exist. I'm sure that now this information's out there, we're going to see a lot of the overuse of Hyperborea, but this is the reason why the Hyperboreans landed on my tier list so high. That 15% bullet damage resistance is no joke. It works against basically every weapon in the entire game. So if you look at the tech tree, how many of these weapons do bullet? How many of these don't? Every one of these does bullet. Every one of these does bullet. Even the ones that do thermal do bullet. All of these do... that's not true. I'm sorry. Most of these do blast. These 2 do bullet. So all of these are blast, bullet. All of these do bullet blast, which is both. Blast, 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 blast. Garbage. I don't even know. Bullet and blast is down there. We've got all blast over here. We've got all energy over here. We've got blast over here and bullet. Bullet, 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 blast. Melee, or collision. Thermal, bullet, and blast. This is a crazy weapon. Mandrake actually does all the damage types, I think. And, other than energy or something like that. Energy, blast, 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 thermal. This does collision now. Yeah, so and of course bullet. Almost exclusively bullet. Bullet, 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 bullet. Oh, by the way, funny story. I may as well show you this while I'm here. The Thyrus really does fire 4 separate shots. That's actually very interesting. When its perk is up, instead of firing a new bullet that just simply looks like 4 shots fired, that is not what it does. It actually fires 4 separate shots. The reason why this is important is because it gets past small armor parts. So this small armor part, the thing does 260? Yeah. So this, you would expect it to do, if it was 15% damage less on all of that, it would do somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 damage less. So it would do 230 something. But as you can see, even though it did take 231, it also did 41 gold. And that's because each and every one of those shots, they hit iteratively, right? The first shot goes through of the 4, takes basically all of the damage reduction, and the other 3 get through without any problems. Pretty interesting. So, yeah, no, Thyrus, really interesting gun, though I think I have to worry about the perk on this thing. So, maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? 173? Oh, right, because... No. Oh, because the first bullet is still going to hit all 3 parts. So the first bullet is going to be reduced by 40-something%, which means that the other 3 will do normal damage. But anyway, long story short, the Thyrus has the ability to strip through small parts very well because of the fact that it actually fires 4 shots. Just a minor note for you guys out there. If there's anything else about penetration and damage resistance that I want to go over, let me think right now. Oh, yes. So, interestingly enough, if you read the description for resistance, that sounds like the damage protection acquired by fusions and all that stuff. It was already worse, but now it sounds like it's a little bit worse than that. It's not. And the reason why it's not a little bit worse, it's actually exactly as bad as it was before, not any worse, is because typically anything that grants damage resistance typically grants it universally. So, for example, if you were to look at the Ermac, right? The Ermac grants the entire vehicle 7% damage resistance up to 3 stacks at 21%. It's not actual 21%. We've all been through this. I'm not going to explain it again. But the idea is it's through and through the entire build, right? And that's also the same with the cohort. And that's also the same with the call, right? Where you get up to that damage resistance that's on every part of your vehicle. So what this does, it's kind of abrasive, where it's not like the previous version of damage resistance. It's not like the actual damage resistance that reduces the damage that's incoming. What it does is it basically means that your entire build has about 30% more hit points. That's what it's saying. That's what all those damage resistances say. This will have 30% more hit points, and like every part on your build will have 30% more hit points. And here's the deal, though. It's not as good as if it were actual damage resistance, but the reason why it is still good is because it's cumulative, it's additive, right? So if you've got to shoot through one part that has 30% more hit points, and then it hits another part that also has 30% more hit points, it will abrade on your attack more than if they just were, didn't have that damage resistance at all. It's still not as good as actual traded damage protection or damage resistance, like the 25% bullet on the tracks and stuff like that. It's still not as good, but it does add up, and it just makes your build basically just flat 30% stronger. It doesn't add multiplicatively as though you were passing through multiple layers of actual true damage resistance that's granted by these parts. Like, for example, this, where it has 10% bullet. It's not as though if you pass through 9 parts, you're going to do 90% less damage. It's not like that, but the parts will be 30% more durable, just in general. So yeah, what this means is that if you are attempting to make a very, very, very powerful build, or at least trying to make a very defensive build, you want layered armor. And the funny thing is, you want your layered armor to have high bullet resistance on the exterior, and you typically are going to consider having blast resistance on the interior. So what that means is the highest for that is like Scavengers and Steppenwolves, if I recall correctly, have the blast resistance at 15%. And I think almost everyone has many factions have 10% bullet. That includes Engineer. That includes Syndicate. I think Syndicate's pretty cool. Yep, they have 10% as well. That includes not Nomads, but I think no. I think even Nomads has 10%. Yep, 10%. So basically, you're going to want to put these on the exterior, and you're going to want to put your heavier armor, like your things from the Steppenwolves, because they have that blast resistance. You want these to be at the point where the shell is exploding in your vehicle, so you take 15% off of that as well. That's what you want to aim to try and do. So you want your bullet blast in that order. You want your bullet on the exterior of your build, your blast on the juicy interior of your build, and everything else you can ignore. I mean, energy resistance covers a very small amount of vehicles. I'm a very small amount of weapons, so you know you don't really overly want to push for that. And thermal resistance is also stupid, if not entirely pointless, because the weapons that are thermal in this game that do direct damage, of which there are only like 3, do extreme amounts of it, and 2, everything else that does thermal does it in such a wide swath, like let's say the actual incinerator, that it's entirely pointless and irrelevant to have it, because the idea is that the incinerator does 6 points of damage. The point is that it overheats your entire build and is attacking your gas gen directly. So thermal, not a great damage resistance. I mentioned that before, but yeah, there you have it. If there's anything else about penetration or damage resistance that I need to go over, I should go over it right now. Yes, actually there is. So in my previous video, I demonstrated math on the screen indicating which one was better for your damage resistance and your overall durability of your build. And that was, if you're going to fuse your cabin, you're going to want to fuse your cabin for durability and not damage resistance. So for example, this resistance to all damage is a bad fusion. Mass is okay, but not the best. But for example, this, which has 10% more durability, it will simply increase the durability of the cabin by 10%, as well as all of the additional parts that you put on your build that increase your cabin's durability. All of those will add together. If you fuse your cabin for 10% damage resistance, it is the equivalent, line by line, exactly the same as increasing your cabin's durability by 30%. It's by 10% or whatever. It's identical. The fusion value is the same. So I was mistaken on that, unless, this is where the caveat is, unless you can get an additional form of damage reduction. So for example, if you can throw the Averter on, if you can throw the Omamori onto your cabin, it is at that moment that everything I said before was 100% accurate. It is simply superior, 100% superior. It is just much better. It is heavily skewed in the favor of durability. But if you have no modifiers, it is just a cabin, and you're not looking to do anything special, and you have no other way of getting damage resistance, and one is fused for 10% damage resistance, and the other one is fused for 10% more durability, the effect is identical. The effect is exactly to the digit identical. But it is when you add or can add any level of damage resistance at all that it heavily skews in the favor of durability. So for example, Grizzly, which will give you 30% damage resistance, which is equivalent of like 22.025 or whatever it is, 23.077 or something like that. If you choose to put on the Averter, if you choose to put on the Omamori, if you're using the Call, if you're using the Cohort, if you're using anything like that, then durability is the correct fusion, because the amount of bonus hit points that you get is still extremely greater than the amount of hit points you get from having the actual the damage resistance on it. All right, so there you have it. New stuff every day. I do highly suggest you guys take a look at the guides. Take a look at how this affects penetration, how things get shot downfield. These guides are not bad, believe it or not, and this actually shows you like demonstrations. So if you guys are new to the game, you're brand new to Crossout, and you're like, oh man, why don't you make a guide for us? I can. However, I do want you, it would be remiss for me not to point out, go here, click this question mark, read all this stuff. That can actually help you out quite a bit. So I'll make a guide for new players upcoming. It'll probably include a lot of the stuff from up there and a lot of the other stuff from up here. Y'all know how I do. All right, guys, I've taken up enough of your time. Every single one of my videos is apparently like 30 effing minutes, and I can't seem to break that curse. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you for watching. I hope this video helped. Peace.